So good to see all of you here. So we're going to be talking about Morocco. Now, this is going to be a sad story. So recently, in the last few days, a 6.8 magnitude earthquake has decimated Morocco as of recently. And so this earthquake has killed more than 2,000 people. This is specifically in Marrakesh, Morocco. So we're going to look at the article really quick, and then we're going to go over that. And then as we read this story, then also going to be seeing some of the devastation that has happened in Morocco as well. And we're going to tie this into how this system exacerbates natural disasters like this. So if we're going to go there, we're going to go to the AP. The AP talks about, it says, powerful quake in Morocco kills more than 2,000 people and damages historic buildings in Marrakech. So it starts off, it says, a rare, powerful earthquake struck Morocco, sending people racing from their beds into the streets and toppling buildings in mountainous villages and ancient cities not built to withstand such force. More than 2,000 people were killed, and the toll was expected to rise as rescuers struggled Saturday to reach hard-hit remote areas. The magnitude 6.8 earthquake, the biggest to hit the North African country in 120 years, sent people fleeing their homes in terror and disbelief late Friday. One man said dishes and wall hangings began raining down and people were knocked off their feet. The quake brought down walls made from stone and masonry, covering whole communities with rubble. The devastation gripped each town along the high outlet steep and winding switchbacks in similar ways. Homes folding in on themselves and mothers and fathers crying as boys and helmet-clad police carried the dead through the streets. Remote villages like those in drought-stricken Orgain Valley were largely cut off from the world when they lost electricity and cell phone service. By midday, there were outside mourning neighbors surveying the damage on their camera phones and telling one another, "May God save us." And so this is what happened. And it's just the destruction that has happened in Marrakesh, in Morocco, is heartbreaking. I do have some footage that I will be showing, but only one video I passed, I will not be showing because it broke my heart so much, I almost started crying. I can describe it to you. It involves a newborn, and that's all I'm going to say. But the things that are happening in parts of the world are definitely exacerbated by a system that we have that could circumvent the tragedies, or at least lessen the tragedies that happens in these regions. So I'm going to be going to this thought here. Let me go into my notes here. Okay. Okay. Ooh. All right. By the way, so what happened in Morocco happened late in the evening as people were going to bed. So let's go.
Good evening. It happened late at night when most people were asleep. There was no warning, and it was absolutely horrific in its power. This is the moment a 6.8 magnitude earthquake rocked Morocco. You can see people fleeing into an alley only for debris to then start tumbling down. The quake was centered here, just south of the popular tourist destination of Marrakesh. The death toll already stands at over 2,000 people. And as we get new images of the destruction, it's clear that number is only going to rise. Now, it is a...
So, just so that you all, let me take this down. don't need that. So just so that everybody is aware, when tragedies like this happen, especially in nations that have a system, capitalist system, where they don't build things to withstand natural disasters. Typically, it's building structures to withstand natural disasters typically costs more money. There's more investment that is necessary when it comes to these types of structures. And a lot of people who, build homes and businesses, corporations and the like, especially if it's something that doesn't happen as often, you typically want to be more lax in how you build it, because you're like, well, it'll be a long time before that ever happens again. And a lot of times they do that in order to save money, especially corporations. They will do whatever they can to save a buck. And so this is why it's important that we have more structurally sound building structures, so that when tragedies like this or natural disasters like this do strike, then people are more safeguarded, because ultimately lives are at stake. And so, of course, a lot of times what will end up happening is in areas where they have more frequent seismic activity. If the government cares enough, they will put in regulations so that these companies, corporations, home builders, what have you, will make the structures more able to withstand earthquakes, or here in the state of Florida, more able to withstand tornadoes and hurricanes and powerful inclement weather. But a lot of times what ends up happening is that they don't do that. One thing that I find interesting is that there is in Africa, where a lot of times people, particularly people who are more of the racist variety, will say, well, you guys built mud huts, things like that. And if you look at some of the huts that African people build, if you notice, a lot of times what they'll do is that they will build it in more of, instead of like a house structure where you have the house and then you have the roof, and the roof kind of comes offset off of the top and it has a lip over the house. Instead, what they'll do is, when it comes to their huts, is that they'll build the entire structure with an arch, right? It'll be a dome. When a powerful wind comes over a dome, because of the aerodynamics of the dome, it actually goes over it instead of hitting it and toppling it over. And it's round. The housing structure is round so that the air goes around it instead of hitting it like a flat. So, for instance, here's a can of nuts, and here's a book. If a wind gust comes, which one do you think is the most likely to topple over? Well, let's say if you have a box or a cylindrical structure, well, what's going to happen? Cylindrical structure is going to be able to withstand the wind, because the wind is actually going to be able to go around it easier, right? Versus a box. Box may end up tumbling over at the very least. So the thing is that when you have different structures, it may cost a little bit more. It may be a little bit more costly, but in the end, it's about the human lives, right? But this is what happens when you try to make profit and try to cut away as much as you possibly can so that you can preserve the profit motive. And so countries like Morocco are, not that much different, because they still have a capitalist structure within them. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this as well, is that and I'm using the necessity of buildings having to withstand powerful winds to basically say that if you built buildings that would be able to withstand earthquakes, then you'd be able to preserve more alive than just building the building and thinking, well, it's a once in a lifetime thing. It's not going to happen to us, because it very may well happen. Because if it happened 100 years ago, I just honestly make it so that it can withstand it just in case it happens. But unfortunately, that's not what happened here. So let's continue.
Is only going to rise. Now it is a race against time to save those trapped in the buildings and try to get to the hardest hit areas that are cut off from the rest of the country. Many, including American tourists, now sleeping outside, fearing more aftershocks. The State Department late today confirming some Americans were injured. We have two reports tonight, beginning with Matt Bradley.
Security footage showing the rumbling, the shaking, and then the screaming as a 6.8 magnitude earthquake struck Morocco. Moroccans are now struggling to reach survivors thought to be buried beneath rubble. It's the most powerful tremor to hit Morocco in more than 100 years. Suddenly, we saw things falling from above, like dishes and other things that were fixed to the wall. We were unable to sit or stand. Then we fled outside, said this resident. Really, the earthquake was very strong. Moroccan military reporting more than 2,000 people killed, another 2,000 injured. The numbers have been climbing all day, and they will probably continue to grow as first responders pull more bodies from ruined homes. We ran outside, but a wall fell on my head, said this man. Sky News' Adam Parsons is on the ground in Morocco.
One of the things that I also want to bring out, and I'm using Morocco as an example as well, is that a system that we have that is primarily for profit exacerbates the tragedies even larger, because you also want to think about the after effects of what happens to these people. Now, I'm guessing to say I actually should have researched this before I started, but let me see. Let me take a look. Okay. So from what I can see is Morocco does not have universal health care. So that, by that being said, yeah. So if a tragedy like this happens, right, you suffer a head trauma from falling debris and you wind up in the hospital. Luckily, you survive. But then are you going to be able to survive the medical bills? We get earthquakes here in the United States. That's for sure. What about housing? We don't have housing as a human right. So what do people do in that situation here in the United States? You see, the interesting thing about what happens in tragedies like this is that people typically don't think about when natural disaster strikes and how that exacerbates the issue of poverty, stress, physical health. They do not think about these things until it happens. And they'll say, well, the government comes in and steps in. Well, what's going on in Maui right now, especially in Lahaina? Right? Natural disaster, tragedy strikes, and they're still suffering in Lahaina. So it's the same thing. When natural disaster strikes, the problem is exacerbated by a capitalist system that is clearly just for profit. And this is the tie that we have to make. Because this isn't just a story of tragedy. This is a story of tragedy that's going to expound after the tragedy has struck. This is going to be a domino effect on top of what has already happened. How many people are going to need money to bury their dead loved ones? I mean, they already have a mass grave right now. But what if that person was the breadwinner of the family? What are they supposed to do? Something, God forbid, happened to me. How would my mother survive? Thankfully, I have brothers. But what if I was an only child? See? This is why it is important to have a system where the fundamentals of human survival are not commodified. Housing, education, food, water, healthcare, these things, and transportation and utilities should not really be commodified in a system, because you need these things to survive. If disaster strikes, then at least everybody will still be preserved alive within the system, because they have those things that are there to make sure that they survive. If you take these things away, then you are adding on to the suffering of people when tragedy strikes. I live in Florida. We have hurricanes and we have tornadoes. Many people have suffered because of tropical storms, hurricanes. Remember back in 95, Hurricane Andrew? South Florida was devastated by Hurricane Andrew. And a lot of people, when these things happen, sometimes some recover, some don't. So just like what happened to the people in Morocco, it can happen to us here, and it has happened to us here. The question is, are we going to continuously keep a system that adds salt to the wound of despair? Or are we going to change it so that if in case it does happen, the tragedy is the only thing you have to worry about? That's the question we need to ask ourselves. And tragedies happen all the time within the United States. Car accidents, drownings, somebody gets hit by lightning, a fire, right? These things happen all the time. Tragedy strikes. But are we going to make it so that the impact is lessened by having a base of material conditions for everybody else? So let me continue. I just wanted to make that point because a lot of times people don't think about things like that until it happens.
Morocco.
There is still real fear about what could happen. Here's a very good example of that nervousness. This restaurant behind me was badly damaged by the earthquake on Friday night, but it only actually collapsed hours and hours later.
The quake struck in the high Atlas Mountains shortly before midnight. This security camera video of the first tremors shows people fleeing cafes in panic and barely escaping falling debris. We went to sleep, but after a few seconds, we felt the earthquake and we went out of the house, this man said. After that, the entire house was destroyed. The epicenter was about 50 miles from the historic city of Marrakesh.
Just as a notation for anyone who may experience that issue, if you are within an earthquake and you are close to an exit, get out as fast as you can and get to as an open area as possible, because nothing can fall on you if you're in an open area. That's the point. Try to get out to open areas as fast as you can. If you cannot, then you get into an area where it's the most structurally sound of the building. Particularly, that's places like doorways. But if you are close to the exit, get out, get into an open area, and do not go into any buildings until you're sure. And typically aftershocks do happen within 30 minutes to 45 minutes afterwards. So make sure that you stay safe when it comes to these conditions that may happen. So, first thought, ground shakes, get out. Get out of your house, get out of your job, get out of your building. And if you cannot, get into an area where it's more structurally sound, like a doorway. Okay? Just be safe. Just wanted to put that out there too, because sometimes people don't realize that when it happens. Let's continue.
Marrakesh, its beloved Medina, or old city of labyrinthine alleyways, now partly damaged.
So parts of the Medina are fine. Other parts, as you can see behind me, are not so fine. The older buildings that are less structurally sound have suffered the most.
And Jose, we might not even know the full extent of the damage yet. Rescue workers are struggling to reach some of those remote villages in the Atlas Mountains near the epicenter. That's where they're expecting to find some of the worst destruction. Jose?
Thanks.
All right. So I just want to get back to, and we want to go back over the response as far as different nations are concerned. I just want to go over this as well, because this is an important piece as well. Let me see. All right, so I'm going to start off with this. It says Morocco will observe 3 days of national mourning with flags at half-staff and on all public facilities, the official news agency MAP reported. World leaders offered to send aid or rescue crews as condolences poured from countries in Europe, the Middle East, and the Group of 20 summit in India. The president of Turkey, which lost tens of thousands of people in a massive earthquake earlier this year, was among those proposing assistance. France and Germany, with large populations of Moroccan origin, with people of Moroccan origin, also offered to help. And the leaders of both Ukraine and Russia expressed support for Moroccans. An exceptional move, neighboring rival Algeria offered to open its airspace to allow eventual humanitarian aid or medical evacuation flights to travel to and from Morocco. Algeria closed the airspace when its government severed diplomatic ties with Morocco in 2021 over a series of issues. The countries have a decades-long dispute involving the territory of Western Sahara. So just to let you guys know, just to give a geographical examination of Algeria versus Morocco, I just want to share this with you guys as well, because I think this is also important so you guys can see. Let me see. Oh my goodness. How are you going to continue without? Thank you. Okay. So I'm going to, let me. Okay. So we're going to show North Africa. So here is Morocco right here. Morocco is the upper northwest corner of Africa. So if you guys want to know where Morocco is, that's where Morocco is. And it barely touches Spain and Portugal, right? And they actually felt the earthquake all the way in Portugal. And they also felt the earthquake in Algeria. But the epicenter was in Morocco, the heaviest of the damage. And so when they say that they had a dispute over the Western Sahara, right below to the bottom left-hand side of Morocco, it borders Western Sahara. So this is where the dispute was talking about. So that's what they're referring to, because Morocco is bordered directly next to Algeria. So just in case anybody's curious about the geographical locations, about what was the dispute, but what's going on is Algeria has also opened its airspace to Morocco so that they can do evacuation flights. So if somebody from Morocco wants to go to places like Libya, Niger, or let's say they want to go to South Africa, or they want to go to Kenya, they may have family there, or they want to go to Mali. They have all these different locations that they can go within this space. They can go to Libya. Well, I don't know if they go to Libya, but if they want to go to Israel, not Israel, but Egypt, if they wanted to go to these different countries, then they can also fly through there, or including if they wanted to go to Turkey. Or if they, needed to go to any one of these other, like Iran, Kuwait, Pakistan, what have you. But that's just to give you guys a bit of a synopsis of the geographics of the region. So I just wanted to share that, as well as what's going on internationally and what they're talking about in regards to the outpouring of support from the international community as well. Now, so one of the things that I actually want to share as well is there's some clips as well that's being shared online about what happened. So make sure I got that. I think I can play BBC. If not, then I'll just mute it. But so this is out of BBC. This is clips. And I can mute it. But this is basically showing where it is, and in conjunction with the hang on, sorry.
شويه انا جالس السطح، جالس كنشم الهواء شويه حتى كنسمع ديك الزز. توقيلا انا شي حاجه حدايا، واحد الوقيته كنقول لا داكشي غادي وكيتجهد. واحد الوقيته كنسمع واحد الزنقه عندنا في الدار كدير زز، شي مش طلع ماشي هو. واحد الوقيته كنسمع صداع، قلت لخوتي زلزال هذا نزلوا بشويه. نزلنا هنا حتى كتشوف الناس كلشي مساكن، الناس كبار الناس صغار. اخوتي في
واحد الدار مشات وجات، واحد الضربه واعره، بنادم كلشي تخلع. انا قلت ما فهمت والو. ما
مزيان
اقليم الحوس و190 حالات.
Wow, 15,000. So that's what happened. The overview basically from BBC. This was shared by rapper Immortal Technique. He also retweeted this. So shout out to Immortal Technique for doing what you can for the people in North Africa, because what happened was just devastating. Immortal Technique, I think he's a socialist. He's a rapper, but he's a socialist. So, and he actually has great music out there. So, regarding what's going on within, communities as well. But this is something I want to share, how strong this earthquake was. It literally rocked a water spring back to life, because it was inactive for a long time, this spring. So Let's take a look.
هاكا يا عظيم ها غير كدا كان يجري الزنزال يفلد الخان مولانا ها الشلالة كرا برمان دائمين ولاون.
So basically, yeah, there's a lot that was going on there as far as it was so strong that it rocked a water spring back to life. That's how strong and powerful that earthquake was. We already saw, I think we already saw that. This is an interesting footage as well here. These are people in a mosque. While they were praying, the earthquake happened. And we're going to see this as well. So these are all the people that are praying in the mosque.
اللهم ارحمنا برحمتك يا ارحم الراحمين اللهم ارحمنا برحمتك يا ارحم الراحمين اللهم ارحمنا برحمتك يا ارحم الراحمين اللهم لا تسلط علينا بذنوبنا.
Now, if you guys see, while they're praying, the camera's shaking a little bit because the earthquake is literally happening while they're praying. I find this very interesting.
اللهم ثبت المنقطع
So they did not leave to stop praying, which I find stunning. So yeah, that was something that was out of the ordinary to me. But I'm glad that they survived. I'm glad they're still alive. Here is this video of a child that's recounting what happened.
ماشي حد مثلي بيموتنا بيموتنا لي البيت ها شيشة أي غمان أرحم ربي نجي السنة أسترحم ربي.
And that's the let me see. Yeah, it says the entire family of the boy perished in Morocco earthquake. Only he and his grandfather survived. And I'm just looking for footage that, yeah. And so here's some of the aftermath of what happened as well. But this just goes to show what I've been saying as far as our systems. Our systems are wholly inadequate because a lot of times where we could build more structurally sound buildings, it's just not feasible, especially in a for-profit system. So this is some of what happened as far as what you can see going on We just got to think about the human element rather than the profit element instead. And I think this is something that we could definitely change in this country. But the thing is that it's up to us in order to change the system entirely. Because this could be us next. It could be you next. And so we don't want to see this happen. And in order to blunt the tragedy or to make it less tragic, we need to change the system for our benefit. So yeah, that's what happened in Morocco. And yeah, so like I said in the title, our hearts are with the people of Morocco for, what they're going through. A lot of times, I'm not sure of how many people in independent media actually talked about this, but it happened, recently over the weekend. So, but yeah, so our brothers and sisters and siblings internationally, what they're going through, our hearts are out there with them. So yeah.